if you are a member of the advisory council, if you could please put your name and affiliation in the chat, that would be great, so that we can get a record of that. And then just to review the agenda, we are going to be going through a presentation / discussion about the covered materials list. And sorry, not the covered materials list, the curbside, recyclable, and compostable covered materials list. And we'll then be following that up with a presentation that CAA has facilitated. And after that, we will be sharing some of the comments that were delivered to us by the Sierra Club. Yeah, so thank you everyone for putting that information in the chat. And Shannon, is there anything else you would like to add before I kick things off here?
Sorry, something just, I have to make sure that, so the only AI notes that MDE is allowed to provide are with Gemini. And so if there's any AI note takers, we have to kick them off, just so everyone's aware. But no, I think that's everything, Sarah. Sorry, I was just making sure that we got everybody in here who is looking to be added.
Okay, great. And I think you will actually be kicking this off.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if you go to the next slide, sorry, Sarah. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We sent this out in our advisory council meeting. In the invitation. Sorry, these things keep popping up. Aha, there we go. I apologize. There is a flag in what Gemini is doing, and also with everyone joining this call. So housekeeping, we are not allowed to discuss any draft rulemaking that we have gone over up until now. Anything that we discussed in the previous meetings, we cannot discuss right now moving forward. And so those are generally related to the definitions and registration. The advisory council members, we're just asking you to please provide your, as Sarah referenced, your name and your affiliations so that it can be recorded that way. Other than that, it won't be recorded in this meeting. Please remain on mute so there's no background noise. And then also please use the raised hand function so that we have an opportunity to let anyone provide any feedback. The public comment is going to be reserved for the last 10 minutes of this meeting. So if you are part of the public and not part of the advisory council, please make sure you refrain to responding to anything until after that, until that time. Yes, Scott, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Shannon. We can't discuss anything that's in the proposed. We can't talk about proposed regulations.
No, what I said was we can't discuss anything that we've gone up until the previous year. MDE cannot. MDE cannot respond to anything related to anything that is in draft, because we cannot discuss kind of where we've been up until this point.
Okay, but we can talk about the timing of regs and what might need to be in regs.
And that is where we are right now. Perfect timing.
Sorry, just
no,
clarifying.
You're fine. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's a great question to ask. So thank you so much.
Okay.
The next set of topics that MDE is proposing to discuss with the advisory council on the next level of regulations are the following. We sent out a survey to all of those that are identified as advisory council members and asked for feedback on the first set of scope numbers, so that's 1 through 9. And then from that survey, there were some comments as to additional topics that could be discussed. Within the service provider reimbursements, we're not sure if this would be something that would be included in reuse and refill. And so there may be some, conjoining of different topics that we have in the previous one, but we did want to provide the feedback. So we had asked everyone to either provide a list of whether they felt there was no interest to veto it, little priority to discuss this topic, low priority topic is interesting but not high priority, This is a priority. And then lastly, this is one of the most important topics to discuss. And just to report on what was responded to for covered entities, this is a priority to discuss. For covered services, service provider reimbursement, this is a priority to discuss. Curbside, this is a priority to discuss. Eco-modulation. This is a topic is interesting. It is not high priority, but useful to discuss. However, I would like to note that there were some questions that were submitted with the survey that did tie into eco-modulation as far as like packaging, implementation, and redesign. So there were some follow-up questions. So this number may be a little bit skewed. Education, there was a question on that as to what was considered education. But this was a topic that was interesting, not a high priority, but useful to discuss. Post-consumer content, this is a priority to discuss. Pro plans, this topic is interesting. It is not high priority, but useful to discuss. Responsible end markets and mass balance, low priority to discuss this topic. Timeline for redesign and infrastructure, this topic is interesting. It is not high priority, but useful to discuss. And there was a follow-up comment that's reflected the question on as to this being an interesting topic. The additional topics that were brought up that they to vote on as far as what your thoughts are reuse, refill, reconciling the timeline, and that also relates to fee and supply data deadlines. Implementation of other states' programs, not just from the Department of Environment's perspective or other state agency perspectives, and then protocols for advisory councils. We had 13 council members responded, so that was within the quorum for what we felt would be a ranking. So 13 folks responded. So what I'd like to do now is transition to asking the advisory councils. We're going to start a poll. And we're going to ask you to please respond as to whether or not how you would like to rank these. So the rankings are still the same in that 1 is of no interest to veto, 2 is little to no priority to discuss this topic, 3 is low priority to discuss this topic, 4, this topic is interesting, it is not high priority, but useful to discuss, 5, this is a priority to discuss, 6, this is one of the most important topics to discuss. So I'm going to, Sarah, would you like to move to the next slide, please? And I'm going to launch this poll. Please understand that we're going to go through each one of those topics. And so please submit, the advisory council members that are present, please submit your responses to this now. So I'm going to launch this. So for refill and reuse. Did it pop up for everyone?
It hasn't popped up for me.
What are we expecting to see here on the screen? I don't see anything to click on.
I got a pop up.
I got a pop up as well, but I don't see anything to vote on.
You have to click it and then it opens up the poll.
Oh,
But the poll has 1 through 5. And I thought Shannon said it was 1 through 6.
I did, and you're correct. If you could just, I'm sorry, it's going to have to be 1 through 5. It's already held within there.
Okay.
I'm not getting any pop-up. It just says additional votes for new topics. That's all it says, like with the fingers, hands. That's all I see.
If you go to the bottom right-hand corner, those 9 dots,
Yeah.
you might have to actively click. It didn't pop up for me either, but
Oh, I'll click on polls.
in there and then click on polls. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And as Eileen indicated, we only have numbers 1 through 5 here, so please use them in moderation.
Okay,
So it's same ranking as 1 is the least interest and 5 is the highest priority. We currently have 7 votes in. And yes, this is just for advisory council members.
It's still not working for me. I don't know why it's not.
Yeah, I don't have 9 dots or anything on the bottom right hand corner.
Neither do I. I done clicked on everything.
If you scroll down, when you click the 9 dots, scroll down and you see the poll, and then you can vote from there.
There are no 9 dots on ours on the right hand side. There's no, like, it's just the
Yeah.
slot.
So do you need to refresh this? That might be the way to do it.
So what might be the better option now, since this is providing difficulty, is we will do a follow-up to the advisory council members with.
Okay, so I am going to go ahead and get this escalated. I would give them at least until the end of the week to give you a call back. I'm not.
I'll end this poll. And again, I apologize for those that did respond. We will send out to the advisory councils a revised poll with those topics. So with that, Sarah, we can move on to slide 5.
Good idea.
Okay. So the curbside recyclable and compostable materials list is something that was required in the law, and this is where that can be found. So it is the role of the department to develop this list, and the covered materials on the list should be provided at an optimal level of service and convenience wherever collection services for mixed municipal solid waste are available. And so we're going to start today with a conversation about the regulations and how the regulations surrounding this list might look. So here are a couple of things that we put together that we think may be covered in regulations. So a description like in the previous slide, just explaining the list, that's pretty standard. And then potentially requirements and the timeline for list publication and delivery. So MDE is required to produce this list and deliver it to the producer responsibility organization, and the producer responsibility organization would then deliver it to service providers. And so just a little bit more detail around that might be needed. And then the last piece here is potentially including some high-level categories of materials that are curbside, compostable, and recyclable in the list. And we can talk a little bit more about that and how that might look as we move forward. But we do want to open it up now to the advisory council and get feedback if there are any other topics that you think that surround the curbside recyclable and compostable covered materials list that might need to be addressed in regulations. We'd love to hear about it, and we can put those up on the screen right now. Yes, go ahead, Martha.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how one would characterize multi-material, covered material packaging. You know, in the context of how this list is going to be used. Like, I've shown you this before. This is a plastic buzzball chiller watermelon chiller. Okay, it's got, the top is like an aluminum can, and the body is, I believe, PET. Yeah. So how does that, when you're telling, I guess how does one characterize this? Is this recyclable material? It's two different materials. If it's put in a bale of aluminum, you've got plastic contamination, and plastic, it's aluminum contamination. So I'm just wondering how that squares with this list. And maybe I don't completely understand that the definition of compostable covered materials and the role. That's my question.
Okay, so I've added to the screen, and if somebody could just confirm that you can see that sticky note.
It went up and went down already.
Oh, is it back?
Yes.
Okay, great. Possibly discussing how multi-materials fit into the curbside recyclable and compostable covered materials list. Moving forward, I'm going to start referring to it as the list, just for the sake of being a bit more concise. So if we're talking about a list, that's what we're talking about today. Thank you, Martha. Does anyone else have any thoughts about this? Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to recommend, if we are going to talk mostly about the curbside list, that maybe we start with one of the existing state lists, and work off of that to see. I mean, we don't have to copy it, but it provides a great outline, and I would suggest Colorado is the most probably the most like the Maryland system list, in the fact that the law, was written more like the Colorado law than the Oregon or the California, which are the other two states whose lists are most developed.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Might be a quicker yes, no kind of. Eliminate a lot and then focus on the things that we have to really spend more time talking about. And Martha, mixed materials usually have a category. The predominant material is going to be the PET there, and then the cap, might come off. But there's a section for mixed materials. But then in that case, with Buzzball, you're going to have both a color of the PET, which is going to separate it from the clear PET as well when you get into the PET categories. So anyhow, I'll put my hand down, but that's my suggestion. So.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, so I think we are going to have a second half of this presentation where we are going to focus on the language of the list, like the list itself. And so I think I would be happy to kind of give a preview of that. But I think that is something that we're definitely going to talk about, how we want to approach creating and developing. Yes. So yeah, Frankie, let's move on to you.
Thank you. Can we also look at the list in terms of the MRA and other guidance for local municipalities, either updating MRA with how they define single stream and the residuals, some kind of cohesiveness for county entities that are trying to report future?
Yes. Okay. Sorry,
Shannon, I see you smile. I don't know if I. You read my mind, Frankie. We talked about this earlier. So you read my mind. That's all. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. I think next we have Mike. Abigail, did you lower your hand? Yeah, looks like you lowered your hand. Okay, yes, go ahead, Mike.
Sure. I just want to build on Scott's comment. Remember, glass also, sometimes we have the closure, and the closure in some cases are metal closure. So I think we should bundle all that together as we go forward, not just for this one particular thing, because you have things that are multi-material, not by design, but because they have a closure. I should be included in that conversation.
Okay, so I'll maybe add to here. Something like this. Enclosures. Okay. Okay, if there are no other thoughts about how the regulation piece of this might look or what might need to be included, I'm going to move forward, and feel free to revisit this if somebody has a thought later on. We can absolutely come back to this slide. Okay. Okay, so this is from Colorado's regulation. And so what they included actually in their regulations was this very high level list. And so we just wanted to show this and make everyone aware that this is an option for how things could look. I'm going to move on here. So now I'm going to transition. Before this, we were talking about the regulations and how the regulations surrounding this list might look. But now we're going to be talking about the list itself, which does not necessarily belong inside of the regulations. It's something that MDE updates regularly and or as needed, updates as needed. And so we're just going to be focusing now a little bit more on the list itself. So to start that off, we're going to be talking about the impacts elsewhere in the law. So just so that everybody has kind of the same background. The first impact of this list is on producers. There will be eco-modulated fees, a higher fee for materials that are not on the list, and a discounted fee for materials that are on the list. And then there will also be impacts to service providers. This is just a description of what a service provider is once again, and what counts as covered services broadly. So service providers are required to accept the materials on this list if they would like to be reimbursed, and they will be reimbursed by the acceptance of these materials. So those are kind of the two spaces, the two groups that are impacted by this list. And so it's just important to keep in mind when we're developing this list how it will be used. Okay. So the responsibilities, as I mentioned earlier, are as follows. MDE will develop and maintain the list. We will amend it as necessary here, and the list will be provided to the Producer Responsibility Organization. The Producer Responsibility Organization will provide that list to service providers, and they will incorporate changes in reimbursement rates to service providers and adjust rates to producers as necessary. And then service providers will accept the materials on that list and provide education for the materials on that list. All right, so there's a little bit of background. Now we're going to be moving on. Yes, go ahead, Abigail.
My apologies. Can you remind me what is considered a service provider in Maryland?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we put this slide on here just to do that. So
just in case I had one of these questions again.
yes, yeah. Yeah, so service providers provide covered services, and covered services include collecting, transferring, transporting, sorting, processing, covering, preparing, generally managing covered materials for non-disposal, waste reduction, reuse, recycling, or composting. And also included in covered services is public education and outreach. So service providers provide those two functions: management of materials that's not disposal, and public education and outreach. Thank you for that question. Okay, so I'm going to now hand it off to Shannon, and she will talk a little bit about the criteria for developing the list.
So the criteria of the list was defined within the statute. We've literally laid out exactly what it said verbatim on this slide. But there are many different factors in developing the list, such as current availability of recycling and compost collection services, processing infrastructure, capacity and technology for sorting, the type, specifications, along with with ISRI and the various different organizations, responsible end markets, processing of residuals, contaminations, toxic substances, quantity of the covered material available, and then any other criteria or factors as determined by the department, the nice catch-all. So what we have done, and Sarah, if you can move to the next slide, is taking a look at what other states have done to evaluate what this criteria may be and how to develop this list. And so what we've done is taken a look at both Oregon and the draft associated with Washington to figure out what their rubric criteria may be. And these are just examples to try to outline to you what those other states are doing to evaluate what is considered to be curbside recyclable and if that meets the criteria within that list. So where within the rubric does this list manifest from? And so when we look at, can you go back to the previous slide, Sarah? Within Oregon, they had these various different criteria, such as the stability and maturity of the end market or access to end markets, and then compatibility with the existing recycling infrastructure. So these really align a lot with the developing the list itself within the criteria defined in 92508C. And so that's what we were trying to look at here is what are these, is this the right criteria to evaluate? And again, moving on to the next slide, again, Sarah, 17. Where do these fall into question within Washington as far as what is acceptable right now and how is it being accepted? Theirs also dovetails into the eco-modulation factors, and which we know is kind of something to discuss with relative to fees in the development of this list. And so what we want to do is pause right now and ask the advisory council. Again, these are just examples of what other states are doing to evaluate. And then again, that criteria for the development of the list. Is there anything that you would recommend that the department consider when developing the criteria and the matrices and various different rubrics in developing this list? So we'll pause right now. And if there's anyone in the advisory council who would like to add comment. Go ahead, Jazz.
Yeah, just a quick question. The Oregon one, which had numbers, saw 5s and 3s and whatnot. Do you have any idea where they came up with those numbers and who did it?
Yeah, this is all available. Yeah.
If it was the state or if it was the consultant?
No, this was developed, I believe, through the advisory council, and the source of the data is listed in this presentation, which will be available after the meeting, as to taking a look exactly at this evaluation. So this is all public comment, publicly available. Unless Scott or Peter, you have anything to add to Oregon's?
Peter, you have. The Oregon process was not as transparent as some of the other states. A lot of it was done in meetings that weren't necessarily advertised to everyone. I don't know. The Oregon, again, I'll repeat, the Oregon baseline system is very different than Maryland's baseline system. I wouldn't necessarily start with Oregon and Maryland. And their decision-making process, has had some challenges, and their cost of their system is extraordinarily high per ton and being challenged. And I'm not entirely sure about the use of eco-modulation in the compiling the materials list. I don't know. That seems to be eco-modulation is afterwards. It relates to producer fees, not what's recyclable in the state or within reach of end markets.
Chaz, did that answer your question?
It's a good response, but no, I appreciate what Scott had to say.
Yeah, I don't know the actual answer. That's
No, I appreciate that does answer the question in many ways. I'm a little disturbed by Scott's comment about the price in Oregon.
That's
Chaz,
our
just
opinion.
to give you a link, put the link to the source of where that document came from in the chat, in case anyone wanted to look at it while we're talking about this, and then I will pull up the source of the slide associated with Washington's is in this presentation.
Thank you.
Scott, before we move on to Pete, do you have anything you wanted to add since you joined? You raise your hand.
No, I'm done.
Pete, you're up.
Thanks. I was just going to say, I'm not necessarily sure we need to redevelop the wheel on how to assess whether a material is recyclable in a state. I think the considerations in every state are going to be fairly similar. The conditions may be different, which may lead to different assessments that maybe a product in one state is recyclable versus another, but the types of considerations are fairly similar. Chaz, to your question on an assessment, I thought the process we had in Colorado, and I may be biased, was pretty good. We had our consultants that did the initial assessment of the work. That assessment then was provided to the advisory board, and the advisory board then provided comments back on the assessment, and adjustments were made to that assessment based on the feedback that was received. So we had a whole bunch of meetings on this in Colorado, and received really good feedback as we went through to make adjustments to how that criteria or how the evaluation was done. And then that third party came back with a finalized report that was then included in the that was included as part of the program plan, and then that received public comment as well. So we had lots of ability to be able to get feedback on that criteria and how it was done throughout the process. But you're right, some of these things are a bit more. How do you give a mark for, viability of end market? That's not necessarily an easy one to sort of give a score to, whether it's a 5 or a 4. So I take your point.
Any other comments from the advisory council on considerations? Go ahead, Martha.
Yeah, I'd just like to emphasize something that Peter Blair put in a important point he put in the chat about differentiating between compostable and recyclable. Are they all being lumped into one thing here, or are we considering separate lists?
So the list is defined statutorily as being curbside, recyclable, or compostable, and it wouldn't necessarily be 2 dedicated lists. It would be one list.
I mean, I actually have curbside collection of both of those things separately. Would there be, I mean, don't we want to be able to track separately stuff about, and certainly the availability of infrastructure for composting would be quite different as well.
So as we move on to the next couple of slides, you'll kind of see how other states have outlined what they consider the list, and that might help to clarify your question.
Okay, thanks.
Abigail?
Yeah, I was just thinking that it might be valuable in the creation of, or the utilization of these lists and all, to also look to the needs assessment that the state of Maryland did previously, just see if there are additional factors that maybe were raised by that contractor that could be a useful factor that maybe didn't come up in Oregon or Colorado or any of the other lists we might be looking at, because I don't remember now who made the point, but Maryland does have fairly different protocols and availability of processes and markets and so on from the other states, and so maybe there are additional elements that could be a factor. Or maybe one of these doesn't need to be a factor in Maryland. I guess that could also be the case, although I always think more data is better.
Thanks, Abigail. Okay, Sarah, you ready to move to the next section?
I will take over here. Okay, so we've talked about impacts and criteria, and we're now going to be talking about balancing the list configuration. And by that, we mean thinking about the language that the list is written in, and how to best communicate the contents of that list to all of the groups who are involved. So here we did some outreach or research, I guess, and looked into what's currently collected in Prince George's County, Baltimore County, and Howard County. And this is just a snippet of that preliminary look that we did. And so just noting that, you know, there's this way in which counties present data to consumers who are recycling or composting those materials, and it looks like this, you know. We've got dishes on the list, we've got aseptic, tabletop milk, and juice cartons. So there's this kind of language that's used when communicating to consumers. And then if we move on here, so this is just an overview of that concept. We've got producers who are going to be registering. They're going to be reporting their materials into specific categories. And so they may be thinking about the materials that they're producing in terms of those categories. And so that's one factor to consider. Let's see if this comes up first. Yes, right. So for example, Snapple peach tea was just a random example. They might be thinking about their materials in terms of a cap that's HDPE color, the bottle itself, which is recycled PET, and that's clear, and then the flexible wrap. And then we move on to a consumer, like a Baltimore City resident, who is thinking about that Snapple bottle as a plastic beverage bottle. And so that's kind of the consumer identification piece on the other end of things. And then finally, thinking about service providers, they may be thinking about the marketability of those materials, the safety of those materials. And so this definitely looks a little bit more similar to the producer side of things. But additionally, service providers are also providing education. So they're also, in some cases, interacting with that language that the consumer is more familiar with as well. And so we just wanted to bring up the fact that there are these different groups that are engaging with each other and with these materials, and think about how that list might exist as published, what kind of language would be used, and then how that list would be communicated to all of the groups who need it. So in Colorado, this is from their program plan. And so this is how their list looks. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. This is an example. They talk about paper for general use, other printed paper, newspaper, So that's kind of how that list looks. And then we are going to transition, although I think we're not quite ready to do so yet, but just giving CAA an opportunity to talk about this educational piece of outreach that they've done with RecycleOn and making information really available to consumers and in that plain language that is typically used by consumers. And then finally, we're going to, there's a stakeholder engagement piece of this. And so this is something that is in the law, just the groups that we engage with, and just noting that we've done engagement with you all, with the advisory council. We sent out that survey, and we've done some engagement with local governments, and then service providers we've done less engagement with. Producer responsibility organizations we've also done less engagement with. We've kind of started that process of understanding who the service providers are and whatnot, but I also just want to open it up now and acknowledge that there's this other category of other interested parties and see what you all think, if there are other stakeholders or other party categories that you all think should be included in this engagement process. Yeah, go ahead, Tiffany.
So quick question, and I'm going to deviate from the question that you asked with another question, so I apologize in advance for that, but you mentioned the local government, and I think some of the comments that came out earlier in this process is that we need to make sure that this process kind of considers what local governments have going. Are you going to share some of that feedback in this process so that we're making sure the legislation captures the regs capture what the legislation's intent was, but also incorporates the impact to local governments so we can all weigh in on that process? Or are these all happening kind of separately in a vacuum? And then you guys will filter it all out at the end. Thanks.
So I think we're currently not at a point where we've done extensive, like we haven't really reached that point yet. I'm not sure,
Sarah,
Dan, if you, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sarah, I think to iterate that, I think MD is being fairly transparent with the information that we've gathered thus far. We posted the information on the website that anything we've gathered that has the opportunity for public comment or feedback. We just haven't gotten to that point yet of the outreach within the local government to say, here's a summary of all the information, but that doesn't preclude us from in the coming weeks of sharing what the outreach that we've done. We did have an interest, in a conversation we've had with CAA to understand, what kind of outreach that is too. So yeah, I think we're not doing any of this in a vacuum. I think we're trying to be as transparent as possible.
Super helpful. I just want to make sure that at the end, when you guys are starting the process, that we just have an opportunity to see kind of all of the pieces that are going into what your considerations are. That's it.
Is there something specific you would like us to consider or recommend that you maybe feel that MD hasn't been transparent on?
No, Shannon, it's not an attack at all on MD's work. It is literally just want to make sure I understand all the pieces when they come together so that we can comment on them fully. That's it. Because the local government piece is the one I want to make sure we consider local government implementation of whatever comes out of this process.
Yeah, thus far, and we're happy to share this. Thus far, we've had some in-person discussions with the local government. We've had some meetings, MDE, and then we've also discussed this within our recycling. We have a twice yearly call with our solid waste recycling coordinators. So we've had that discussion, and we've done some outreach at the recycling conference, the Maryland Recycling Network conference, the past 2 years, both in person and up on stage. And then we have sent out a survey to the waste, because part of the waste characterization report had non-disclosures information on there. And so what we are trying to do is fully understand who are all of those authorized for contracts for collection within the state currently. Not to say that it couldn't expand, obviously, with new businesses popping up, but who are those service providers that the current 20 odd political jurisdictions utilize for their services?
Great, thanks.
Mike, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So I'm looking at this stakeholder engagement. It doesn't have manufacturers unless you included them in other interested parties. I think that's a very important stakeholder that we need to call out.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. Any other thoughts about this? Yeah, go ahead, Mick.
Just following on with Mike would be considering the B2C component of this, e-commerce, large e-commerce producers, they're highly engaged in EPR and conversations nationally around EPR. And any number of companies, their only reach to B2C is through their e-commerce component. I mean, I think that those two are massive, absolutely massive. And the number of pounds that are produced and being pushed into B2C annually.
Thanks, Mick. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, the other one I was going to consider, I don't know if you've got under service providers as end markets.
Thanks, Peter. Chaz?
I
Chaz,
don't
did
have
you
a question
your...
at the moment.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought I saw a hand there. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to move on from this. And we do have time for public comment. I think we're going to save that until further toward the end of this meeting. But I do just want to revisit this first slide that we had over here. And now that we've had this conversation and we've dug into things a little bit more, I just wanted to ask one more time if there's anything that you all think should be included here. Anything that we wanted to revisit. Yeah, Abigail.
Hey, so thank you for returning to this one because it did give me a chance to think about it a little bit more. I do think, Martha raised a good question in asking whether there's a separation between recyclable and compostable. Compostable is still kind of an underdeveloped thing in Maryland. A lot of it is subscription based instead of, municipal or county provided. A lot of it is more in the commercial side. And so having, I think in Maine, for example, they just have a separate column for it, but just something to indicate a separation. It's uniquely complicated for the paper industry because a lot of paper products are both recyclable and compostable. And, in most cases, we would prefer it go to the highest best use. But you don't want someone that produces a product to have to choose which one it's going to go to and have a sort of a tick against them. The other thing I was going to suggest was I think there's some great examples of conversations that have happened between agencies and the haulers and the MRFs and so on about, realistically, what is curbside recyclable and what are they, and I live in Montgomery County, so what's going to get that little tag that, too much of your bin was incorrectly sorted and you need to try again next week. And so having kind of that starting point, I think is great that exists, but there is an opportunity, I think, whenever we have these conversations to revisit and check on whether new information is available. Later on in this presentation that you've got the three sort of factors for what goes into whether something is ultimately recycled. There's the, is it picked up? There's the, what is the information provided by the county? And then there's the, does it have a market and so on? And so sometimes there is a lack of communication between those points, and that can result in someone along the chain saying no because they think that someone else in the chain isn't going to take it from them. And so, for example, a recovered fiber mill, they might say, absolutely, if that material comes to us, we know that we can break it down, we can turn it into new pulp, we can turn it into a new product. However, one of their providers heard 10 years ago that wasn't something they could accept. And they've kind of continued on with the perception that it still isn't something that can be processed. And so having those kind of checkpoints, but also, one of the opportunities with a program like this is to revisit and evaluate and update information. And I think that's also something we sought to make sure was in the legislation in the first place, was opportunities for revisiting whether there's a place for the material. Pizza boxes being an example of one that has changed in the last 10 years in whether it can be processed. And then recognizing how different parts of Maryland are, and that has a major impact on what can and should be recycled. Having universal lists to the extent that they can be possible is great for consumer understanding, and that results in not only a decrease in incorrect or wish cycling, but also can result in an increase in correct distribution of material that should be recycled, but people think it can't. If there's sort of a standard place, if you're on the cusp, you live in Prince George's County, but you work in Montgomery or DC, and the rules are a little different. Obviously, we can't control DC, but some of the other cuspy parts of the state. So I'll step down off of my soapbox now and let others opine.
No, thank you very much for that feedback. Chaz, go ahead.
Yeah, I may have missed this because I was unfortunately late to the call, but are we using, what definition of compostable are we using? Is there a specific one in the EPR statute, or are we using the one that currently exists in COMAR?
We can't discuss definitions right now, Chaz, because that was and that probably is what you missed. We anything that MDE has proposed for revisions or changes that we brought about in previous meetings up until this point, we're unfortunately unable to discuss them if there's a draft of regulation circulating within internally at this point that's moving forward. So we did talk about definitions in previous meetings that you can certainly take a look at, and you can look at the statute associated with it.
Yeah, go ahead, Chaz.
No, it's kind of a non-answer, which is unfortunate.
Does anyone else have any thoughts about this? If not, I am going to move on, we are going to have a presentation from CAA, but that will be in a little bit. So I think we'll move up an agenda item and open the comments that the Sierra Club provided here. So give me 1 second to pull this up. Okay. All right. So Martha, I don't know if you're still on the call. If there's anything you'd like to go through regarding the comments that you had sent over, that would be great.
Sure, I can do that. We've been talking about the fact that you're going to start writing the regulations first on the registration process, and I hadn't really looked carefully at that. There's a lot of detail presented in other meetings, but what I looked to see what information is being requested at the time of registration, and then looked to see what the PRO or producers have to document in their annual reports to see if there was something missing in one or the other. And it turned out that in section, the annual reporting requirements in the EPR for packaging bill, it's here it is, section 9-2509, that they actually have to report an overall redemption rate and recycling rate of beverage containers in the state. But there's nothing in the registration requirements at the beginning of the year even close to that. At the beginning of the year, it's just a list of producers participating in producer responsibility organization, a list of the brands of each producer, and a list of the covered materials of each producer participating in the PRO, the name, address, and contact information. Of course, in other words, there's no report here. At the registration time, there's no requirement that, at least for beverage producers, that they tell you how many containers of the various brands and by material they plan on producing or selling in the next year, or did so in the previous year. And that information would feed into your ability to track in the annual report the progress on the recycling. And redemption wouldn't be applicable right now, but even the recycling rate for beverage containers. And that's the only thing I was pointing out. So I was suggesting that if one was to add to the registration requirement for beverage companies, a list of each brand of beverage containers that they intend to sell, offer for sale, or distribute in the state, including the size and material of the containers of each brand. And then for each beverage container type, whether the container is refillable, and the number sold in the state in the immediately preceding calendar year. So that would fill the gap, making it possible to kind of track the annual report over time. And a side benefit of that is that if a deposit program is eventually adopted, it would actually really reduce the workload for everybody for the registration, and that there would be very little additional to add. You'd be able to kind of distill from what's all the registrations already of beverage producers, most of the materials that we need for that registration. So that was the only suggestion for registration. We have suggestions for other parts of the regulations, but I was only focusing on the registration part, which is something that we've discussed in the previous meetings and not discussing today.
We would obviously raise concern with that process and the expansion of that additional registration requirement, particularly if the point is to prepare for a deposit system that's not currently under law. Maybe we can just hold that, and if deposits become a thing, then we could consider that. But I'm happy to provide additional feedback once we have a chance to go through it, send some written feedback.
this would be so that they could actually report in the annual report that information, which is required in the EPR for packaging bill. Oh, yes, Scott.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I think what it really, I mean, Martha found something definitely that's in there. To me, it really speaks to there's a registration requirement, but there's also then a data. Then at next point, there's a data requirement. All the producers, there's a registration, and then there's going to be a point at which data they collect. And it seems to me that at a minimum, the provisions related, you have to look at the future reports that the PRO is going to have to produce to make sure that you're collecting the data on the front end. I agree that redemption's not really an option, is not something you can do until or if there's a DRS, but the recycling rate for different materials and different types of things is in there, and we just may need to make sure that the data collection for the producers is not just weight, but might also be, some other numeric elements that are reported in, so that the reports that come out, can be sourced. But I also agree with Peter's comment. I think there was a comment about timing. It was something that got added to the list of things that was going to be on the survey that we couldn't take. But I think it is important that we focus on that. Getting the timing of all these issues done, registration reports, those kinds of things all have to really map out. There's some gaps.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for pointing out that comment. And I think that was one of the things we had on the list. So I think that will be part of the follow-up survey, if I remember correctly. But thank you, Peter.
I was just going to add that there's also something in there when you were talking about eco-modulation, about refillable and reusable, and like that's not anywhere in the registration form either. And I don't know, so that's a reason why when you're just talking about covered materials, it's hard to kind of interpret what the quantity of refillable material is, as opposed to, if you know that a package, okay, the packaging is actually refillable. Anyway, it's something to just think about.
Does anyone else from the advisory council have thoughts about this or anything related to what we've been talking about so far today? Okay. Yes, Frankie, go ahead.
Yeah, I can see where it'd be beneficial to also get weights just for comparisons, since most of our matrix for reporting for the MRA is weight-based, not count-based. So I could see having to be able to correlate that data between the different sources and do some more in-depth comparisons. So I think it was a good point.
Okay. Well, we are going to move things along. I think that, Peter, I'm not sure if anyone is on yet, and if not, no worries. If it's not something that we get to today, that's also absolutely okay. But yeah, maybe I'll check in. I don't know if anyone's online yet.
I
know that we're a bit early.
See anyone yet, but I haven't been looking at the site. It doesn't look like they're on yet.
Okay, then I think what we might do is open it up now for public comment. Yes, yeah, I see that. Andy, thank you. Yeah, so we'll open it up now to public comment. If anybody would like to share anything, go ahead.
Justin, you're up.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Justin with Veteran Compost. I was just calling in to check on the status of my application to join the committee.
Yeah, so we are currently processing those, and we'll definitely let those who have applied know when we've made decisions about that. Yeah.
Just to clarify, appreciate the answer. I started asking to join this committee in June of 2024. I was allowed to make a formal application in July of this year. And so it's been 6 months. I've gotten a lot of letters of support from BPI, from Closed Loop, from the US Compost Council. There's no current representation for compostable products or composters, and the timeline's moving along very quickly. So when can I expect an answer? Because if it's not me, I'd be very sad to hear that as the longest serving composter in the state and a member of the BPI board of directors. But if it's not going to be me, we got to get somebody in there that can represent our industry. So when can we expect an answer?
I think that I personally don't have that answer. I think we will definitely let you know and appreciate the interest, and you know, for now, at the very least, we'll make sure that we keep this time open and allow for public comment until those decisions have been made, but we are working through that process.
Okay. That's disappointing. All right. Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Lorenzo.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. I know that in the beginning of this call, you said you could not, answer questions related to MDE implementation and regs, et cetera. But I know there was a meeting with the chamber, the Maryland Chamber, a couple of weeks ago with MDE and the secretary. And I know that proposed regs are in the drafting stage, and I think they've actually been presented to the secretary. Do you have any idea when those regs will be available for the public to opine, or to at least to see?
Yeah, I think that it's not a date that's been determined yet, but there is an email list, and this is a great reminder. If you are part of the public, or if somehow we missed you, I think we have all the advisory council members, but if you're a member of the public and you're not currently on our email list, please reach out. Thank you, Shannon. She just put the email to reach out to in the chat. Please reach out and let us know and get on that list, because we will be sending out information about public comment and things like that, and there will be a process for making sure that's posted and accessible. So thank you for the reminder there.
Thank you. Can you put that up one more time? It just disappeared on my screen here.
The email?
Yes. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
Oh. Yep. Okay. Great. Okay. Lorenzo, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Peter, go ahead.
Hi, Peter Blair with Just Zero. 3 quick-ish things. First is kind of just a clarifying question. In terms of the ability for non-advisory council members to weigh in on some of the things that are discussed outside of this brief public comment period during the meetings, what is the appropriate way to do that? That's question
Yeah.
1.
Okay. Yeah, I think that anyone can submit comments to us at any time. We will, be transparent about them. So yeah, but you can submit again to this email address comments at any time.
Okay, great. So the other question is, you know, during the discussion specifically around the covered material list, there was a reference to Oregon's program, to Washington's program. Has there been any type of evaluation by MDE to look at which programs are the most similar to Maryland statute? And how are the decisions being made for which programs you're looking at to do a comparison for things like developing the compostable recyclable list? You know, Minnesota was not brought up, but from my understanding, the legislative process in Maryland was very much mirrored off the law that passed in Minnesota. So I'm just trying to understand, are we just looking at all the states, or has there been some type of decision around certain states more closely mirroring Maryland that you guys are specifically interested in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that first, we're definitely interested in hearing from you all and from the advisory council about recommendations for states to look at. But I know that there are some states that have slightly different pieces in their legislation. Like California has that plastics piece that Maryland doesn't have, and so we consider things like that as well. But we are pretty broadly looking across states. And yeah, I think like specific to the compostable materials list, that's not quite the stage that we've reached yet. But yeah, that's our approach so far.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. And then finally, just a comment in terms of developing the list. I really would encourage you to strongly think about responsible end markets, which, you know, is vaguely defined in the statute, but has a big role throughout how you're determining a lot of things related to this program. You know, that is something that I think many states have not done a good enough job of kind of evaluating when they're creating these lists. That is a huge part of whether it's or not something is actually considered recyclable. So I know you're trying to kind of bucket things as you did that polling in the beginning. I would encourage you to really start thinking about the responsible end markets component early, because it's going to impact all the discussions that you're having.
Thank you for that feedback.
And Sarah, I just brought up that the criteria for the developing the list, it does indicate that it is availability of responsible end markets as part of that requirement, Peter.
Okay, great. That's all I've got. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, John.
Hello, John Richard here with Tetra Pak. I noticed in your internal list you have a combined category for gable top and aseptic cartons, which Tetra Pak strongly supports because they are recycled using the same infrastructure, and from a materials perspective, they really are the same. So access numbers are theoretically the same, and fees should theoretically be the same. Cartons do make up a small percentage of MERV volume, from about 0.5% to 1%. And splitting that volume between the two categories on the public list makes it pretty challenging. So they are combined in a single category in several other states, Maine, Colorado, and I believe Oregon. So just something for you to consider as you go forward, recombining those two categories like you have your internal report.
Thanks for that feedback.
Can I ask a clarifying question on this, John? When you were saying combined lists, would you mind sharing where you saw the combined list or the list you're referring to?
There was an Excel list earlier in this presentation that had.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so I wanted to clarify on that. Sarah, did you want me to take over presenting the slide that he is referring to?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're referring to this list, just for clarification purposes, this is simply a spreadsheet to indicate that there were, we just started looking at some of the Baltimore Metro, DC, DMV county lists that they identify on their websites for a consumer, what they consider as acceptable for curbside. Right, so Howard County, Baltimore County, and Prince George's County. Howard County utilizes a private MRF operation, whereas Baltimore County owns and operates their own. And then again, Prince George's owns and operates their own. And if you look on the right-hand side, those are their descriptors of what they consider to be acceptable curbside. And there was just a really broad variety of what people identify saying this is acceptable or unacceptable based on those, whether it was paper. Again, like I don't know if I can annotate on the presentation here, but Sarah, if you want to circle what I mean by paper and then what is considered paper and cardboard, they're just different lists that the general public has been provided.
No, that helps. It's just the recycling infrastructure is typically the same, which is why you'll find that category combined on most lists. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Okay, well, I think we may end up pushing.
I think Alex just joined us.
She
so
did.
he-
Great, okay.
Alex, do you have the ability to present?
I believe so. Sorry, I'm just
You're totally fine because you just got here. So I wanted to pause for a second to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and then prepare or provide feedback you can on RecycleOn.
yeah, let me try and share here.
Because we're mid-afternoon on the East Coast. So
All right, let's see. That can you all see that one?
Yes.
Excellent. Good morning from Oregon. It's not quite afternoon yet over here, but I'm glad to be here presenting to all of you. My name is Alex Bertolucci. I am the communications manager for CAA Oregon. So coming out of my shop is all of the education and outreach materials. And as the first state to launch EPR, we have kind of led the way a little bit. So I'm going to share with you all a little bit about what we've been doing with education and outreach and RecycleOn. Feel free to stop and ask questions as we go along. But really, I just wanted to start by kind of setting the stage about what we're responsible for as CAA and what the local governments and service providers that we partner with. Oregon has a little bit of a different law where we have what's called a shared responsibility model. And so there is a little bit of sharing that you all might not have, but just to give you a little bit of information of how we do it. In that blue oval, that's all of the localized instructional material, print, mail, cart tags, newsletters, the local website, all of that kind of stuff, mostly managed by local governments and service providers, so the haulers. The green oval is what's managed by CAA. So that's all the statewide ads. We have social media under the RecycleOn Oregon brand. And then in the middle, we have kind of an overlap, and that is our website, recycleon.org. And in our case, recycleon.org/Oregon. And this provides another trusted source of information so that community members can get that information. But there's also off-ramps to the websites of local governments and service providers. So there's still that strong connection to those folks there. It sounds like you all have heard about the RecycleOn brand, and this was created as that public-facing brand. Circular Action Alliance still exists, but RecycleOn seemed to be a little more friendly and publicly accessible to folks. So you can see our mission there. It's really to make recycling easier, more effective, better guidelines, clearer service, really creating a system that's trusted and works. It's reliable, trusted, empathetic, and bold. We try to be friendly and approachable. And our main message is just being part of making a better recycling system here in Oregon. I talked about that shared responsibility model, and we have our E&O portal, our education and outreach portal. And this is a really cool tool that local governments and service providers, community-based organizations can log on to. They update their list of accepted materials in the portal, and that feeds a search tool on recycleon.org. But it also allows them to create customized educational material that all creates the same look and feel. So here you can see there's different things that folks can do. This is our recycling guide. They log in. Some communities collect glass curbside, so they can toggle that on or off, which adds or removes that little box of glass. There's 2 lists of metal collected items, and they can click between those 2. They can select between 10 different no icons. So if the community wanted to focus on keeping batteries out, they could move that to the #1 spot. If they didn't want to focus so much on food being in there, they can remove that one and put something else in there. So it really allows them to use these materials to reflect the needs of their community. The last few at the bottom, they can put their logo, website, and phone number. So it co-brands these between RecycleOn, the local government, or the hauler, as well as that contact information. And then Oregon's law requires us to translate the material into 11 non-English languages. So you can select there, and it will automatically change all of the language into the language that you select. But it also switches one material from each category. So for example, plastic, it would add an item that reflects Vietnamese culture, something that folks from that community might see in their grocery store or their shelves. So it kind of connects with that. And that happens with each category: plastic, metal, cardboard, paper. And if glass is selected, it does that as well. Here's a broader look at some of the materials that we have created for folks, all under the RecycleOn brand. These all live in our E&O portal, and they're pretty much all what we call dynamic. So there's some sort of editable feature there. So the recycling guide is what we just saw. We've got cart tags. Many of these are bilingual, so you can select that second language as well. We have a mailer here. There's a couple different messages that folks can put on the front. There's a contamination reduction message, as well as a change is coming message. So depending on the community and what they currently have. We have some oops tags. Again, you can edit what the no icons are, billing inserts, decals, and a number of items that aren't listed because they might not be as fun to look at. But we have messaging timeline guides, a playbook to help folks understand kind of the branding, press release templates and newsletter templates, images of all of those materials that you've seen, as well as more, logos, social media toolkits, and a terminology spreadsheet. So we're not just saying good luck out there. We're saying here's the words that we're using. Here's the words that are translated across all of those different languages, so that when folks, if they need to create materials outside of the E&O portal, maybe it's something specific, they have access to everything that we translated for them. So making it as easy and plug and play as possible. Moving over to the website, I kind of mentioned this earlier, recycleon.org or recycleon.org/Oregon is our specific site. This is just another trusted source. When we worked with local governments and service providers early on, we heard from them that they really wanted to keep that strong connection with their customer or their community member, and that made a lot of sense to us. So we didn't want to say, get out of the way, we're only going to take over. We created a site that just, however folks are getting information about recycling in Oregon is good for us. And so on this tool, on this bottom section here, you'll see this tool, which allows folks to enter their address, and from the E&O portal where folks updated their collection list, what this does, it allows them to enter an address and it shows what's collected in their community based off what their folks entered there. There's all sorts of tools and things like that across the site. And we'll continue to grow that over time. We're really learning what folks are asking, what they need to be successful in recycling, and we're building from there. And as other states roll out, we'll learn from them as well and continue to improve the site. Like I mentioned early on, we're responsible for statewide ads. Those all fall under that RecycleOn brand, and those launched August of 2025. The first phase of that was to build awareness that something's changing. Most folks hadn't heard about our law or the changes until then. And so we've been running these ads on Google, billboards, transit, digital audio, podcasts, all over the place, and had really good success with getting the word out. We're also on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram to help get the word out, and have been able to see what's working and connecting with folks and what's not. So like I said, that phase one was really the launch. It's recycling's changing, recycling's getting better in Oregon. And we've had almost 70 million, this is maybe a couple weeks old with these numbers, so we're probably over 70 million completed video views at this point, which is really exciting. Oregon, like most states, have never done a statewide ad campaign on recycling at this level. So to know that 70 million people or 70 million views of a video are completed in a state with about 4.2 million people means people have seen this ad a lot. Some of my friends say, Alex, your ad is chasing us around the internet. And I said, good, that's what we want. We want you to know that something's changing, to connect with us. And we've seen the traffic to the website follow those patterns as well. We've had audio listens, and all of this has been at a cost below a national average for these tools. We started running a phase two to kind of build on that about anti-contamination. We did some early surveying and saw that folks think that they could bag recyclables. And so we did this think outside the bag, and we tried a few different messages. Again, it covered many different platforms. It is still running, so we're at just under 13 million audio listens there, 50,000 site clicks. And then the third phase, which is also still running, it's a much smaller geographic area because these are for our RecycleOn centers. These are the drop-off centers for materials that don't go in the recycling bin at home or work. And so these are very targeted as we open those up around the state so far. And so a little bit smaller, but still really great engagement on those. And we've been really happy to see folks engaging with those. And at the bottom, you can see Spanish language by far is the second most spoken language here in Oregon. And so we've spent about 12% of our budget focused on that. So that is kind of the quick and dirty overview of what's going on here in Oregon. I'm happy to answer any questions if folks have any.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Alex, thank you very much. This is very insightful, really commendable. I was just curious about one comment you made about, switching, the language to reflect the specific community or culture, and you put icons to represent that. Is that something you can demonstrate on this presentation?
So let me see here. If you go to recycleon.org, let me see if I can just switch to sharing, present something different. I think this is one I can share here. All right. So when you go to recycleon.org/Oregon and go to the What Can I Recycle page, here you can select different languages. So I'm just going to select Somali. And you download the guide. It might take a second because they're, this is a little, but you can see here, this material here, obviously the language has been switched, some different things here. The newspaper changes, the item here changes as well. So that's
very helpful. I think if there's anything we need to emphasize, this community outreach and education is going to be critical because, as you know, the biggest challenge is making sure people know what to recycle, how to recycle, and having these type of things to really tell them what to do is very important. least in the places where they've worked, like in Europe. So I really glad to see this, so quite commendable.
Yeah, and so far the data is showing that a lot of those materials haven't been downloaded in other languages. We do have social media posts and things like that in other languages as well. So I would encourage you to make sure that it's data driven and maybe not start with all 11 languages that we did. That's been quite a heavy lift and made any edits a little more difficult. But looking at the possibility of translating 2 different materials as needed is what I would highly recommend at this point, because we've made a few changes since these materials went live, and it's a big lift to translate all of the materials that we have, and even just changing one word can be massive undertaking. Any other questions from anyone?
Looks like Chaz, keep your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Alex, it's a fascinating presentation. I appreciate good looking site and a lot of view counts. Of course, view counts still have to translate into action. I mean, logically, participation should increase, contamination should go down, at least theoretically it will. And I know it's early, but do you have any data on response to this, increased participation, both in single family, but also in multifamily housing? And do you have anything unique for people living in multifamily housing?
That's a really good question, and something that we've really been leaning into to try and figure out. At this point, we don't have good data. Part of the reason for that is Oregon, there was many programs that didn't exist or that didn't accept a large list of items, mainly our rural communities. And so as those programs have rolled out, I would love to take responsibility for the increase in tonnage that's coming through, but I don't think I can show that that's directly related to education and outreach yet. So we don't have that data yet. We are looking at how folks, we did some early surveying, and we're going to look at how that changed and what's folks' understanding of the brand and generally education and outreach is. And so we will do that. We also have an audit center here in Oregon that takes samples of recycling from around the state, sorts them into 122 different categories, and they'll provide that data back to us as well as the communities. And so that's really what we're going to use as a data, as well as one data point, to see if that contamination is going down, as we can, trial different topics in different areas and see if that does better in one area than another, or one message works better than another. So, we launched in July as the first EPR program, and so we don't have super good data yet, but we'll get there, and that's a big plan of ours. To your second question about multifamily, we plan to roll some things out for that this year specifically, but we did create some door hangers and things like that, which have shown success at other communities. They're based off some of the recycling partnerships tools that they've used as well.
Thank you.
Looks like Mario. Does that?
Yes, good morning. So Alex, looking at your presentation, couldn't help but to notice a lot of things in there. Like this slide that you just showed, resonated with me from a grocery standpoint. And I just have a question about that. What is your focus or actionable items or resolutions that you may have received as it relates to like pallets?
Like shipping pallets?
Yes.
So those are actually exempt in the Oregon law. So we really focused on consumer-facing products and packaging that they would see. We do plan to do some business education as well. We haven't developed that yet. Again, we really wanted to focus on the large section of consumers and single or residential focus, and then move into that business, schools, colleges. There's so many specific ones that we can get into. But yeah, that is a plan. Pallets wouldn't be added to ours because they aren't covered under the law, but some of those other items, we've gotten a lot of questions from businesses on shrink wrap for pallet wrapping and things like that. And so we'd probably add that into some of our educational materials, but we're still working on that.
You did that. You answered my second question with shrink wrap. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thanks. All right. Well, I don't see any other hands popping up. I do really appreciate you all reaching out as you're kind of thinking about this and moving forward. Happy to answer questions or send you examples. Again, you can see what we've done on our website there, recycleon.org. You can follow us if you're on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're very cool on all of those. So you can see some videos of me on there, and I look forward to more conversations and seeing what you all can do as you roll out your law.
Thanks, Alex, so much for providing that presentation. That was a really great summary of what you have done out there, and we appreciate it. I do want to open up the floor one more time for public comment, if there is any other public comments after Alex presented. Okay, so thank you all very much for participating today. As a follow-up, we will send the advisory council members those additional topics to discuss. And again, mde.epr@maryland.gov if you have any feedback you'd like to provide. Again, being fully transparent on what we can share and what we can discuss. And we appreciate everyone's thoughtful commentary today. Thank you so much. And we want to give you back 20 minutes of your time. Mike and Angie, if you have any feedback you want to provide.
No, I would say thank you to everyone. And of course, more importantly, to CAA Oregon person. I tell you, Alex, that was very helpful. I think it gives a lot of insight to us. So thank you very much. And we may be reaching out to you just for some clarity as we go.
Agreed. I just want to say thank you for everybody's comments. I think a lot of the comments were very important and on point of some additions that need to be made. I especially like the end markets, considering, that's my background a lot. So, and I really love the presentation, and I'm a big fan of kind of unity and everyone kind of doing the same thing. So I really like how the education pieces can be used for pretty much everyone, and it's uniform. There's no questions, it's in a uniform kind of format. So I think that's going to be very helpful if we go that route for a lot of our counties and a lot of our municipalities. So we put out the right message and the same message. And I think that's what's important here. So thank you again for everybody's comments. I think it was a great meeting. And I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday.
Bye, folks.
Shannon, you are muted.
Yes, I'm sorry. There is one comment in the chat. I just want to follow up on. Mark asked, when is the next advisory council meeting? We have not yet scheduled it for 2026. This was the last one for 2025. And we will, if you're on the email list, you will get notified when that we've made that announcement to add to your calendar. And additionally, we will post it on the MDE EPR website for everyone in the future.